Join us at Your Own University. Like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. You're not going to want to miss a bit of this.
Hey, welcome back to podcast now 10, the Big X. And today we're going to talk about yin, taking your time, which I'll say is a bit ironic given behind the scenes here. Look, we happen to have less time to record this podcast. So there's sort of a paradoxical beauty in that. And we've touched on the paradox of things, the duality within the unity of things. And so in a way, this actually is sort of a tip of the hat to that, our not having a lot of time to talk about taking your time. So Lisha took some time for herself, and I've heard a little bit about, but I'd love for you to share here on this podcast and to have us ease into this topic that way. Are you up for that?
Sure.
Okay,
What
cool.
questions do you have? So taking time, really,
like why did you start? Like what instigated it in the first place, I guess would be the first question.
I feel like I've gone through a massive paradigm shift. I think a lot of the world has gone through this paradigm shift. And I'm one with everybody as everybody's one with me, right? So so I was going through it and I just lost touch with who I am. I also live in a place in the world that in Alaska we're more rugged and there's more outdoor things that happen, and I have a large part of me that desires to be on the water and the sun and less clothing, and more free.
Mm-hmm.
And that part of me doesn't get expressed as often or accepted when I am. I stand out. I'm judged. I feel judged. And so I had lost touch with that part of me. Very, very in tune with the part of me that's a nature lover and a yogi and a sporty girl and a hiker and an intellectual. But I lost touch with the flirty, fun, feminine. I mean, down to the place of the only thing that I did for my feminine, just to like hang on to her by a shoestring, is I got my lashes done. And I got an eye infection and my lashes had to come off. And that was the first time in 8 years. And that was I was okay with that. And I went home and I was just like, oh my gosh. But that happened actually after I got tickets to Mexico. So what happened was a friend of mine who I hike with, and I know a little bit and got to know a little bit. She had taken a month-long vacation. And before that, another friend asked, she was talking about going to Hawaii, and we were talking about going to Hawaii together on the 22nd. Because I just needed some sun. I needed a break. I'm in the middle of this dissertation. I'm taking some big leaps in my life. And I just wanted to find myself, connect with myself, and recenter, just get quiet and let go of everything I ever thought that I possibly knew about myself, and all definitions and ways of being and desires and should-haves and would-haves and could-haves, and just been like, okay, soul, who are we now? What identity am I stepping into as Dr. Lisha Antica? And finish my doctorate, work on my doctorate. And so that actually didn't pan out. She had some things shift. She ended up going to Hawaii, but she had some things there. And my other friend, she was already down there. She said something, she wrote this post, and I was like, oh, I wish I had your worries. And she's like, come on down. I have 2 beds and a cot. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. And I just looked at tickets, and I found a ticket out of Alaska for $500 round trip to Cancun. Yeah, that doesn't happen. And I didn't think. So I said yes. And I took that leap, not knowing what I was in for, where I was going. I shifted my clients to one day and one another day. I planned to go diving, which I hadn't been diving since I had a divorce 6-7 years ago. And I was just like ready to be a mermaid. And and take time to be quiet, just be with myself. And the first half of the trip, it was just that. It was uncomfortably that, which is another story that I was releasing and letting go. But it was just that. I had amazing client calls. I got to work on my dissertation. I got to meet with my teacher. I got to meditate on the beach. I got to do yoga on the beach. I got to go snorkeling and scuba diving and just spend a lot of time alone, contemplating, listening, being quiet. And it was beautiful, just divinely orchestrated. And then, as I was doing that, day one, I figured out my dissertation. I knew exactly what I was talking to, and that I thought I did like a 380 switch talking about time. And really, I shifted 3 degrees just the other way. So everything was already there and I knew it. I just didn't know that because I had thought that all my work was gone. And then that extended time, right? That gave me a lot of time. So I had a really cathartic cry. I went to bed at like 7 o'clock at night. I had a complete reset. I woke up the next day. I did yoga. I had clients all day. And it's just beautiful doing yoga and sitting by the beach and having my client calls, right? Like when you work like us, like me, like we can work from around the world. It's pretty amazing. So I just basked in that beauty. And then the next day I went diving and we had a monsoon rain and it flooded our room and flooded all my stuff and I couldn't use the computer anymore. So after 3 days of really working on my dissertation and doing that, time stopped and it was like, nope, you can't do this. We moved downstairs to another room and the bed was like a wooden plank basically that I got to sleep on. And I was like, this is so uncomfortable. And I asked God for this or something better. This or something better. And just basking in that gratitude and extending time. And literally a girlfriend that lives down there, she's a fantastic branding photographer. She's a money and wealth consciousness coach. She literally was a rock star and just super amazing woman, that soul sister. We had dinner on Friday night during the monsoon rain. Like that worked out basically. She wrote me and she's like, how about I pick you up tomorrow night? You spend the night with me and then we go to Tulum, which we had already planned for Sunday. And so basically that ended up me shifting into a penthouse on the beach and photo shoots and fun attire and fancy meals and everything that is just so me that can be shamed and wronged in this environment, in Alaska environment, not by everybody, but it's just not really how we live here. And it was divine. It was divine. It was posh. It was fancy. It was incredible. It was photo shoots. It was dancing on the beach. It was everything that I had been seeking and missing in myself, even denying a little bit. Green drinks and juicing and like yoga and bands and bars and it was amazing. And randomly by the last night, the computer was fixed. It worked. I came home. I worked on my dissertation all the way home and arrived here. My man picked me up. It was divine. But what happened in that as far as time is I couldn't have planned it. But I was open to the expansion of time. I was open to where time took me. And I was open to that release. And that's what I remember today as I was doing yin yoga, as you were writing me about doing this topic of yin, which is meaning taking time. But for me, what it means more than anything, Jason, I'd love to know how you feel about this, is it means the acceptance and the trust of enough time.
So sorry. So what's your question for me? That's a lot.
What do
There's so
you
much we
think?
could talk on.
Yeah. Like, what do you think about yen being more of the trusting and the acceptance of time? So we're in that moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would consider yin just the release of time.
Mm,
It's hard to
yeah.
think about yin and yang as related to time, actually, um, except for yin being a letting go, relaxing, and that being therefore the relationship to time is a release from time. It's actually not a relationship to time. It's a relationship to timelessness. It's just a relationship to letting go
Mm-hmm.
and things dissipating and dissolving. I mean, that's the yin aspect of things, whereas the flip side that's married to that of the yang is the condensation or the gathering up or the collection of all of those energies, which at some point could be accelerated into the tracking of time, which is just a human construct, of course, the clock, which we haven't used our whole human history.
Yeah.
But so time really then actually has nothing to do with the clock. It has to do with how you feel, how your consciousness is tracking experience, and it just feels different in different times, different relationships, and different chemicals happening in your body. So I would guess, and I'm not a scientist, that like when time feels tight, there's probably some cortisol being released or something like that. Whereas when time's
On my
feeling
belly.
what's that? Yeah. So yeah, and time going slowly is a release, is not an acceleration nor a condensation of things. And possibly, I don't know if it would have to do with dopamine, but I'm sure one of those drugs in there that apparently human beings are so dependent on. There's the set, this. Oh, I guess it would be serotonin is probably being released.
Serotonin. Yeah.
And so you could say time is a chemical interaction with with yourself as affected by reality. Yeah.
So my question is like, how, because you feel like we feel this crunch. So when we feel this crunch, which is natural, I think a lot of us get anxiety, like there's deadlines, there's all this time. Like,
well, there it is right there.
How can we breathe into that to shift our relationship and our perception of enough? So that condensing, contracting, cortisol creating emotion doesn't take hold of us and we can still think. Because I don't know about you, but I know when I feel pushed or crunched, like I literally cannot think.
Yeah. Well, I think we need a part 2 for all of this, but the very fact of having a deadline will create the conception of a time crunch, and the whole idea, concept, and like you could say practice of trying to have time be slow internally while it's actually not externally is like the $1 million question. I mean, that's like what all of yoga is based upon, is being able to actually find the timeless in the time, so that it's like an extension of chop wood, carry water. For those, I don't know if you haven't heard of that expression, audience. Chop wood, carry water. It's like what happens before enlightenment. You have to chop wood and carry water, which is that version of like, you have to make money, you have to have a job, you have to do this. And then, okay, you're enlightened. What do you do afterwards? You chop wood and you carry water. But the difference is that your conception of what you're needing to do feels different. And it's because you're able, I mean, it's clearly some sort of relationship with yourself that wouldn't be static because everything's moving all the time, but it sounds like a completely harmonious relationship with yourself. And how does one attain that? I don't know exactly. I think we talk about it all the time in all of these different ways. I think a lot of the paradigm, it depends who you are as well. So like for me, my intellectual aspect is very satisfied by paradigms. So when I hear a paradigm, it can be illuminating. It literally opens up space inside of me, and that space. And here we go. Here's a yogic and in other traditions axiom, which is time and space. That's one thing. Time and space are not separate, actually. So they are themselves one thing, flip sides of one thing. So as you're able to create internal space, you do slow time. And I guess that would be the closest thing I have to a tangible answer for you.
Mhm.
Great question. It's the timeless question, if you will. So I think, well, it's so hard to pinpoint it, but I think that's as close as I can get. The more space is, the internal space that one creates is the slowing of the time that they're able to affect.
Yeah.
It's the effective time slowing.
A book that I love that goes into this expansion of time and our ability to expand time is the Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And I love his teaching in it about when he learned how to slow this time down inside of him so he could trust the universe to provide. And I've done this for years where if I feel rushed, I slow my breath. Okay, this is if I remember, I should say. I don't know, nobody's perfect. But when I remember, I slow my breath, I ground into my feet, and then I ask for that support from God, universe, source, the threading of everything. Like, make it so I just arrive at the appointment on perfect timing. And I've gotten to the airport in record time this way, never hitting a light. I've gotten to yoga classes and stuff where everyone's just starting late. I've gotten to meetings where everyone was late, right? I didn't even have to say anything. like where normally I would have felt this push. So that's a book that I highly recommend is The Big Leap. And then practicing yin yoga. Do you have like a favorite teacher, or are you planning on doing like a yin yoga class? Have you taught yin yoga? I call it breeze, and it's a little yin, long holds, restorative opening. But my background's with Iyengar when it comes to yin yoga, not yin traditional yin. Because there's a yin yoga, everybody, if you don't know that.
Right. Yeah. Well, if to answer your question, yes, I've taught yin, and Paul Grilly was our go-to mostly.
I love him.
Yeah, he's. I
Even
like
in my
how
teacher training, I friggin' love Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, and yes, I've taught yin at different studios in different locations, different countries, and I in terms of the long holds, yeah, I always like to hold long, and that probably aggravated many a student in my non-yin classes, where we weren't supported in a lot of our postures, or well, they weren't all supported, but where they're expecting the postures to be held longer. I like to just hold them long in general, because in my experience, and what's gotten out of an individual posture that's not held long is not much, but possibly if that's in conjunction with a variety of other postures, then you're creating a different sort of experience. But in any case, now we're starting to get off into asana, and I definitely think we should have a part two on, at least a part two, if not more, on time, starting possibly with see, here we are. I love paradigms. So this remembering of the concept of time space being together, or the reality, you could say, and many might say, of time and space being connected, I think would be a great starting point for like a part two of talking about time, slowing time, relationship to time, which I'll probably not run out of
Or creating space.
material for.
I feel
Creating
like that's
space,
what
sure.
the breath does in me, is like create space, and then I'm like, okay, can I open to things being different? And the more I can let go of the how they look differently and that control, like I did in Mexico. Like, I don't know how this can feel different. I don't know how I can feel accepted and loved and appreciated in this moment, right? But I'm open to that, right? I'm seeing this paradigm. I created it, and I'm open to something new, and then boom, not even what I thought could happen or would happen, like happens. And that has happened in my life. How do you create space? Just last question. Do you have any tips or tools that you do to create this space and remind yourself that it's going to be okay, that and to lean into that faith and that trust?
Yes. Well, first of all, this idea of the feeling of space, then changing certain thoughts and views on things is like your threshold. I'd love to hear more about that another time. When I think of creating space inside, it's like pre-intellectual. It's simply the relationship of your internal experience. So what would I recommend? Well, actually, and I do this very often, is focusing from Eugene Genlin. It's probably from the 70s. It was his dissertation. Since then, there are organizations you can go online and look for focusing. I hopefully can get a URL at some point, because there's a particular, I would go to the official focusing site. I just don't know what that URL is at the moment. And the description of what focusing is especially is brilliant. And however, there are just instructions on focusing, which is simply your internal observation. It's like a somatic exercise where you're internally observing what is speeding you up, what is uncomfortable, what is intangible that you can't quite pinpoint. There's actually a step-by-step process. You don't need to follow the steps just as they are, and the website will explain that beautifully. But there are also steps, if you don't know how, to take you inward. It's 6 steps, and they basically allow you to connect with yourself. So the moment that I'm doing that is the moment that I'm finding space, usually. If I'm not trying to do anything, if I'm not in my intellect, if I'm simply interacting with my inner sensations, with my subtle sensations.
Yeah, that's another
Focusing by Eugene Genlin. Yeah.
I didn't know it's called focusing, but
Yeah.
that somatic practice of what is happening. I teach it in a lot of my courses too. I freaking love it. So beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing.
So maybe next week we'll talk more about this space and space creation. And then everybody, Jason will send me a link, and I'll have that link to the focusing website somewhere. We'll have
Cool.
it here on our page, so you can look that up. We're not associated with them yet, but we're open to that. Focus people.
Focus peeps. What's up, FPs?
We're open to have you teaching at your own university. We have a class coming up with Lynn this next month on podcasting, actually, and getting your word out. So we're really opening up to that. It will be in our business department for our members. And for anybody, you're welcome to join us live. So thank you so much for joining us for our 10th podcast. Gems, Jason, thank you so much for being you.
Thank you, Lisha, for being you. And thanks everyone for being you. And we welcome you to develop who you are. That's the point of you.
That's the
And
point
we have
of
many
you.
tools and paradigms to offer, including this class coming up. So hope to see you soon.
Yes. See
Thanks,
you there.
everyone.